Hey guys, this is James at TeaDB. Today I'm bringing you a extended Inbetweenisode. So this has been a episode that I've been waiting to do for a bit now, and it's thanks to Louie that I can do this over at Bana Tea Company. So we are doing a storage comparison of Hong Kong stored 5 treasures, or treasures from 5 mountains, I should say, and Los Angeles stored treasure from 5 mountains. So it's the same tea. And before we get going, I want to quickly cover that Hong Kong sort of has this reputation of being like port storage, like really humid, and sort of like the home of traditionally stored or wetter stored teas per se. But this tea was definitely not stored in sort of those stereotypical conditions. It was stored dry leaf. It was probably stored, I believe, by Vesper Chan, who was sort of known as one of the main, supporters or big advocates of dry stored tea. So this comparison is not going to be as simple and straightforward as Hong Kong is like very aged and Los Angeles as not. So, excited to get going. We're going to take a quick look at the dry leaf, and then go into a tasting, and then take a look at the wet leaf at the end. So, I'll see you. Alright guys, so we're going to take a quick look at the dry leaf of these teas. So here we have the Los Angeles stored tea, right here. Taking a sniff out of the bag, we sort of get our reference point. Los Angeles is obviously not known as being a place that is terribly wet, or California in general. Certainly not compared to parts of Asia where tea is often stored. And taking a sniff out of the Hong Kong bag, it's definitely not dank, but it smells a little bit darker, a little bit more florals, perfuminess to it. And then we have taken some leaves out of here. So we have Hong Kong over here on the right side, and Los Angeles here. Looking at this, it does look like the Hong Kong tea is a bit darker. I am going colorblind slowly, so I am probably not the best person, but that's why we are recording this on video camera, so you can tell for yourself. But looking at this both in the viewer and in person, it does look like the Hong Kong stored tea is a little bit darker than the LA stored one. Let's get to the tasting, and we will see what the difference is. Here we are comparing these teas, and I have actually not had these teas yet. I have not given them a rinse. I have preheated the vessels, and I've tossed them in. We have Los Angeles here on my left and Hong Kong over here on the right. Because so much of the storage happens early on, and being able to discern the differences, I'm just waiting to do it all on camera. So, taking a quick sniff of Los Angeles. It smells very good. There's a lot of floral notes, maybe a little bit of caramel sort of stuff going on. And it's actually quite a bit different here. I'd say it's a little bit earthier, a little bit more rosish. There's definitely still some florals going on for the Hong Kong tea. Neither one smells particularly dank or anything like that. So both teas definitely fall into the dry stored category. So we have 2 freshly cleaned chahais right here. And because so much happens early on, and I'm using a little bit atypical ratios for me, a little bit less leaf than normal, just so we can not get terribly over caffeinated. So here we go. We're gonna actually drink these rinses, just because the rinse can tell you a bit about how the tea was stored. So we're gonna do the rinse, and then well, I guess it's not a rinse in this case, but we're gonna skip the rinse and go to the teas. So We are seeing a bit of a color difference right away. The tea on my right looks a little bit darker than the tea on my left. So take that for what it's worth. It's still quite early. Here is the Los Angeles tea. And taking another smell, both of these. So some of that brown sugar, florals, really some lighter aromas coming off of that. Yeah, and definitely quite different for this. Neither one is certainly definitively better or anything. It's a little bit deeper, a little bit darker for the Hong Kong stored tea. It's sort of what you'd expect. In fact, the difference is a little bit stronger than I expected. I don't think I've drank the LA stored one yet. I'm assuming that's what will happen if you buy the five mountains from Linda. But anyways, let's get drinking, guys. So here is LA Storage, take number 1. So it's still pretty light. It tastes similar to the aroma. Florals, yeah, nothing terribly remarkable about that. Pretty light, decent body, considering that it's the rinse. I'm not used to drinking the rinse, so it's a little bit different for me. In comparison, definitely a little bit darker, a little bit heavier. Again, pretty similar to what the aroma was like for that tea. Some florals, but it's definitely not as high noted as the Los Angeles stored tea was. Alright, so we're going to get to the teas now. And because I am using a little bit less leaf, if you guys are wondering why I'm steeping this a little bit longer than I normally do, that would be the reason. And for both of these teas, to be clear, I tried pretty hard to break it down. It's lightly compressed into, so it wasn't terribly difficult, into sort of the Malchow form. So we aren't working with uneven chunks, and I think that's important so that these teas brew out, evenly, and it makes the comparison a little bit more plausible, or a little bit better, in my opinion. Again, we are seeing some color difference for both of these. We have just a little bit darker, deeper yellow here. It's small enough that I wish I had a second opinion here, but from my vantage point at least, the Hong Kong stored tea definitely does look a little bit darker. These are also both Linsong teas, or Linsong. Getting florals, a little bit of creaminess off of this. Really quite pleasant. And from more of that deep perfume. I feel like I smelt this a little bit out of that bag, but sort of like some dry flowers. It's definitely a little bit more intense, the aromatics coming off of the Hong Kong stored one. So this tea is 2011, so this is 6 years old, so certainly not an old tea. I'd say it's sort of between a young tea and starting to show its age. You definitely taste some of the age in this, but it's not really brewing up a very dark color as we would sort of expect for something about this age. So cheers, guys. A little bit buttery, a little bit creamy, a little bit more body. We're getting more to the gist of the tea. It's pretty sweet. grassy. Very nice texture to the tea. Sort of has, I don't know, sort of like a silky, very smooth texture going on to it. And just being clear, this tea is actually a very nice tea. We might bring it on to a normal show at some point. But I've definitely enjoyed the sessions of this tea. So thank you to Linda for sending it to me. But the point of this comparison is for the storage. So Hong Kong tea here. Definitively darker, sort of dark floral notes going on, maybe bits of leather. It feels just more heavier. It feels more substantive. I have a bias towards darker teas, so I'm going to be naturally sort of predisposed towards this Hong Kong tea, and I don't think that's necessarily the case for everyone, but that tends to be where my preferences lie. So quite delicious, and it's very interesting having these teas in this context because I've had the Hong Kong store tea and it never crossed me as sort of like a darker note tea. And it really shows you that a lot of taste is just very comparative, and like we compare these teas versus what we're having. So if I had this Hong Kong stored treasures from Five Mountains compared to a traditionally stored tea, of course it's going to taste much more floral. But because we're comparing it versus the same tea but in even drier storage, the difference, it emphasizes different aspects for the same tea. So really interesting in that aspect. And this is going to be the final steep that we do on camera. Yeah, and I think if I had to do a subsequent steeping, I would definitely need to reheat that water. But we are doing these in quick succession, and the Tetsubin does do a decent job of keeping the water fairly hot. So we're going to keep going. Okay, and I think this is just continuing with the trend. I think the liqueur has gotten a little bit darker in each steep, but the Hong Kong one seems to be maintaining the stronger, deeper color. Taking smells. Could I tell that this is the same tea? I think probably. The storages are different, but the tea, I think the tea character shows through for both of the teas. If this was actually your really dank basement storage Hong Kong stuff, would I be able to tell? It'd be harder to say. And I think that would obscure more of the original tea's character. So really continuing on, I would say that at this point the Hong Kong one has a little bit more has a little bit more aromatics coming off of it. Period. In comparison, the aroma smells a little bit weaker from the Los Angeles stored one. Cheers, guys. Buttery, creamy, maybe a hint of tanginess to it. I wouldn't say it's quite sour, but a little bit more in that direction. A little bit more astringency coming through as well. Yeah, a little bit of mouth drying in that infusion. Thicker, smoother, a little bit rounder. Yep, and continuing to be darker, a little bit heavier just to this guy. All right, so we are going to finish this episode with showing you guys the wet leaves of both of the steeped out versions of these teas. So I will see you guys soon. Are looking at the wet leaf now. I poured water over these and just let these go for a while. As you can see, we have the LA stored over here on the left and the Hong Kong over here on the right. So, you could tell that it's a blend, supposedly from 5 mountains, of course. So there's a little bit of different material on each of these. But you can also see that the Hong Kong one, sort of as I expected and as has been consistent with our tasting, is darker. So you could, one way to tell of the storage and how wet it's been is to just steep out the tea and then take a look at the wet leaf when it's all done. It can be an effective way to tell if a tea is a really wet shang versus a ripe tea. Also just useful to tell sort of what the conditions have been. So as you can see, both teas definitely have a lot of greenness still in them, so definitely not either are not humidly stored teas, but one is also showing that it's been stored slightly more dry than the other one. So thank you guys for tuning in. Big thanks again to Linda Louie for sending me this sample for this comparison, and I will see you guys next time. Cheers.